Good day, everyone. This is Tad Campbell, Mason County Extension Agent for Ag and Natural Resources. Along with me is Philip Konopka, Lewis County Ag and Natural Resource Agent. And we're going to talk a little bit about getting familiar and understanding pesticide labels. As a pesticide applicator, it's really important that we know how to navigate a label, because there's a lot of important parts in that label that sometimes we need to go and find rather than them just being right there in front of our eyes to be able to get the correct information that we need on various situations. The big thing is that we need to know the label as well, because we have to keep records of all these chemicals that we're applying. And for us to be able to get the correct information to have a compliant record, we need to know how to navigate that label to be able to get the information we need.
And don't forget, the label is the law, so we have to follow that specifically or we're breaking the law in essence.
That is correct. That is very true. So, with that being said, let's get right into it. Philip, what are the different classifications of pesticides?
Well, you have two different types of classifications, Tad. There's general use and restricted use, okay? General use, you don't have to have any special certifications to purchase this, such as an example that would be the Loris Band 50W, okay? Versus on this example, the restricted use is Lower Band 4E. Notice it's the same name, it's a different formulation. It also specifically says that it's restricted use. If it is restricted use, you have to have a private pesticide application license. I'm not saying that general use is more safe. Usually the restricted is for either safety reasons with people that are applying it or environmental reasons as well.
Correct. And when you see that restricted use box on a particular chemical, it's going to tell you why it's deemed restricted based on the information that's in that box, correct? It will tell you what particular thing it's harmful to in that relationship. And that's true. And it's really important that we realize that general use or restricted use, both are chemicals that we are utilizing to get rid of some kind of a pest in our operation. And even though the restricted use gets the most notoriety as far as the potential to cause the most damage and harm, there can be a lot of cases where the general use can be in cases where it's just as harmful.
Yes,
and things like that.
I would treat any chemical as it being very dangerous, especially if you are the person that's applying it.
Okay, good information. So, with that being, okay, Philip, why don't we go ahead and get started here and start talking a little bit about parts of the label. This is just a standard label that you'll see on most containers and everything like that. All the information that's on this label is going to be on all the other labels that we see, no matter what the trade name, brand name, and company and all that good stuff. So let's go through here and try to identify some of the things that we need to know as applicators for record keeping and just becoming familiar with the parts of the label itself.
Sure. We've got the brand name, or the common name, what most farmers know the chemical by. Active ingredient. We need to pay special attention to that and see what is actually controlling the pest, what type of chemicals are doing that. The registration number is very easily confused with the establishment number. We want to make sure that we get the registration number. That's very important. Each pesticide that is labeled with the EPA has its own individual registration number.
And some containers do have an EPA establishment number as well too, but we want to make sure that we concentrate on that registration number, correct?
Correct. And then what size of container it comes in. This particular one comes in 1 gallon. 2.5 gallons is pretty common size, and then if you're a larger farmer, you can get up to several gallons per container. I love that. Keep out of the reach of children. Should be keep out of the reach of everybody that's not applying the pesticide. That means that this product can do some harm, especially to little people or little children that we're trying to protect. And then the bottom part always has the name and address of the manufacturer. So if you got questions or something like that, we can fall back onto that.
So we can contact them if we need to from that standpoint. Well, we're going to move forward with the label and still looking at that front panel. We know that the not net contents is 1 gallon. We talked about that in the last slide. We've got the signal word. It's caution. That could be caution. It could be warning. It could be danger. And that danger can be actually offered in a couple of different ways. It could be written out as danger, or it could be a skull and crossbones, kind of just a picture, so that we are aware of those kind of things. But this is where we're going to see the action word or the signal word that we're most concerned with, as far as basically dictating the harmfulness of that product.
Sure. Another way to think of it is kind of, if you're a beef farmer, how they grade beef. You got prime, select, and choice. Those, the more marble you got, the higher the cut. In this case, it is caution, which means slightly toxic. That's probably one of the safer products out on the market. Warning, we increase our toxicity a little bit. And then danger is very highly toxic. So if you see that word danger, or like Tad said, the skull and crossbones, handle that with very, very careful caution.
Correct. And we need to handle all these chemicals cautiously, but do pay particularly more attention from start to finish when you start seeing that signal word called danger, because it is a highly powerful chemical in its own regard from that side of things.
Especially when you're mixing the products, because that is the opportune time you're going to come in, better chance of coming in with a highly concentrated dose of that chemical.
Yes. As applicators, during the mixing process, that's when we're most vulnerable to the highest exposure to any of these products. And we want to kind of think about that. And we may talk about that a little bit later, but, what are we wearing? Most of us have the same pair of shoes that we put on in the morning, that we wear all day on the farm. Usually it's steel-toed leather type work boots or something like that, correct? And if we get some of that chemical into our leather work boots and not realize it, we could run into some problems down the road 2 or 3 days later and not realize that we've exposed ourselves during the mixing time 3 or 4 days prior to. So we need to be aware of what we're doing and how we're doing it with these chemicals. So we're going to get a little bit back onto the label. Sorry to get off track. But another part of the label is the first aid section.
You definitely need to read that before you even begin to open up or apply a pesticide, because if something would accidentally happen, you want to be ready to act.
This is your first mode on how to treat an overexposure to a chemical, and it's here on the label. That's the first thing that we need to be doing. We need to make sure that there's someone else that knows when we're mixing these chemicals, so that they know where this part of the label is as well, because if we get incapacitated, we may not be able to divulge on what was going on. Someone else may have to be the one, talking for our behalf, and it's really important that they understand where this part of the label is, at mixing time, application time, and things like that.
Yeah, I think you brought up a good point, Tad. If somebody's not there with you to help you, to watch you, make sure somebody knows where you're at all times. So if something does happen, heaven forbid, we can get the proper treatment if needed.
Correct. And then we've got the hazard to human and domestic animals caution, and what to do, and if it's possible, things that we could work through from that side of things as well, too.
Personal protective equipment. That is great. I mean, you need to read that. That is the minimum amount of protection that you need when mixing and applying this chemical.
Right. And as Philip said in the very first slide, the label is law. And for us to apply and mix this chemical legally, we must be wearing that minimum PPE, that personal protective equipment. And as farmers, as applicators, sometimes that's the part we overlook the most. The part that actually is going to protect us as individuals is the part we sometimes overlook the most. And yes, there's days when we're mixing and applying chemicals and it's hot, it's nasty. It's not. You do not want to be in long sleeves. You don't want to have the extra gear on to be able to handle these chemicals properly. But that is put on there through testing to make sure that it is safe for you as the applicator to be able to handle that product. And small amounts of exposure over a long period of time can cause a lot of ill effects to the human body. And we ultimately are applying a product that is getting rid of a pest.
Mm-hmm.
And if we get too much of that into our systems over a period of time by not wearing the proper PPE, we can start seeing problems associated with our health as well too.
Correct. Yeah, and we want to make sure we take care of ourselves for sure.
Definitely. And it's got environmental hazards on the label as well as user safety recommendations too. So do make sure that you're reading the complete label and don't just overlook or skim the personal protective equipment section. That is really important for us all to follow, as is all parts of the label. But this is one that we definitely want to follow because it's our protection.
Yeah.
Make sure we get this product on properly.
Directions for use. Like we said earlier, this is the law. Any time you go off label without having the proper documentation, you're breaking the law essentially.
Correct. And we've talked about it in a previous presentation about the record keeping, but this agricultural use requirement section has a lot of vital information, but it's the one area where we see the REI. And it can give an REI for this product. And then you can see in this one that some states have 4-hour REIs while California has a 12-hour REI. So it can vary from state to state depending on what has been approved through testing and things like that.
So keep in mind, if you have to go back into your treated area before the restricted entry interval or REI is up, you need to go back to that first slide and get the personal protective equipment back on before you enter that field.
Correct.
For your protection.
Again, we want to protect ourselves.
Some other additional information that you can find in the label, mixing application instructions. Some chemicals, if you mix together, have to be mixed in a certain order.
Correct.
So we want to make sure that we don't gum up our system. You're talking about a fun day. It's bad enough spraying, but now if you got to get down in a sprayer to clean it out, that's a whole nother day's job.
And something that we could just do by the order in which we would mix things to prevent that. So knowing and reading the label makes a big difference. When you're talking about mixing chemicals, not all chemicals are compatible with one another. And the label should allow you the opportunity to mix that. But most of the time when you mix chemicals, even the label recommends that you do that in a test situation rather than just doing it in your tank. And one of the short video clips that we'll have as part of this presentation is the jar test method. And that's a really quick way of knowing if two chemicals are going to be compatible or not when you put them in a tank mix. And it's much better to do it in a small case scenario like that rather than to have gallons and gallons of this product that's not going to work very well at all.
Not to mention the money we've just thrown away by not doing a simple little jar test for compatibility. Also, what's going to be on here, pest and disease management. I mean, the pest that we're actually going after, a specific chemical may not control it. So we want to make sure that our pest that we're trying to control is labeled on that particular chemical.
Right. And it's going to tell us, where our other restrictions are, where can we use this or not use that particular product, as well as fumigation requirements, drift management, and then the restrictions with rotational crops. If you're spraying a grain field today or on this day, it may have an effect on what kind of forage you can plant behind that for not only weeks, but could be months up to a year or so before you could plant certain kinds of things behind that. So knowing what we're applying and being familiar with the label and from that aspect allows us to be able to make decisions that moving forward, we may want to rotate those fields out of something and into something else to make them productive in other ways for us. And if we do something in the beginning that's going to deter that, then we basically lock ourselves into some things that we don't necessarily want to be in as far as situations go with our farm operation.
Some more storage. Storage is extremely important. I wouldn't recommend personally that you purchase any more than you're going to use that particular season.
Right. But no need to have a lot of extra stuff on hand due to the volatility and the sheer concern with these products. With them being designed the way that they are, we just don't want to have a lot of excess products sticking around. However, if we do run into a situation where we're spraying multiple things and we're not spraying a lot of it, but we're spraying multiple products, what do you recommend as far as a storage area?
We need a specific storage area with plenty of labeling so that we can warn emergency crews if something would happen that, hey, there is some dangerous products here. Make sure it's locked. Make sure it's ventilated. It'll go into the label specifically what it needs for this particular product to be stored. And the longer you have the product, accidents happen. I mean, that's just the way things work. And the longer you have it, the more chance you have to have an accident to happen.
True. And we don't want to store these chemicals in other rooms or storage areas where we may have livestock feed, consumables, those kind of things. So we may want to look at dedicating an area or a space that we can make into a storage room for these chemicals, since they are pretty independent of themselves, when we start looking at our operation goes.
You may want to also store them into a plastic container. So if something would happen to the original container, it would break. It wouldn't leak down into the ground. It would be caught into that plastic container, and then we can deal with it from that point.
Good ideas. And then pesticide removal or disposal. If you have extra pesticides that you want to dispose of, you're not going to use them. You acquire a farm and there's already some there, which isn't far-fetched. I mean, we've had several situations like that. You can contact the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, and they can work with you and try to schedule a time to actually dispose of those products properly with you. A lot of times they may come out and do that. Other times they'll find out what kind of product you've got and walk you through the process of proper disposal from that.
And don't be scared to call them. I mean, you're not going to get in trouble. They want you to call them to dispose of these properly. That way we're not worried about the environment, your health, or somebody else's property.
Correct. Yeah, it's definitely an open line kind of a communication with them, and they're always willing to try to help for your safety, the environment's safety, and to get rid of the products that aren't needed any longer from that situation. So definitely something to keep in mind as you look into those situations. Acquiring a farm that's got old pesticides on it, or just running out of uses for some of the stuff that you bought in the past.
So you've done a good job of management. You've only brought the products that you need to use for the crop. What you get done with the empty jugs, triple rinse them, and a lot of counties have got a rinse and return program.
They do. There's rinse and return programs, and a lot of times you can contact your disposal or landfill and see if they are accepting those as well too. If they've been properly triple rinsed and packaged the way that they're supposed to be packaged. But KDA does offer regional pickups at certain times of the year. So as producers, we can store our pesticide containers after they've been rinsed out, and usually in late spring, early summer, and then early fall, they offer a couple of times a year to get in certain areas to be able to pick those containers up. And anyone that has any questions about those potentials can contact the local extension office, and they can give you kind of a time frame to be looking for those rinse and return program pickups for containers.
But please don't burn them. That opens up a whole nother can of worms from an air control pollution standpoint to some of these residues that may not completely be destroyed by the fire as well, and then ultimately endangering your health. So we don't want that to happen. So dispose of those pesticide jugs properly.
Good comment. Well, we've talked about the pesticide label being the law. Everything that's on there is what we have to follow and things like that. Even saying that, there are a few exceptions to pesticide labels, correct?
Oh, there's always exceptions.
There's exceptions. So we do have the ability to apply a pesticide at a dosage or concentration or at a less frequency than listed on the label. However, the caution with that particular statement is that we're dealing with a lot of resistant weeds right now that are cumbersome in a lot of cropping scenarios right now where we can't control those through some of the methods that we have in hand, or it's very difficult.
And not just weeds. I mean, some of the
insect pests,
fungicides, and all that kind of stuff. And they're nothing new is coming down the pipe. So I mean, what we got is what we got.
Right. We're not getting a lot of new chemicals to control different kinds of pests. So we're basically trying to utilize the ones that we already have to our usage right now. And so if we continually to lessen the rate that's been stringently tested over time to come up with these labels, then we could run ourselves into a situation where we see more resistance out there with some of these chemicals than if we were using just the minimum rates. Another exception would be apply pesticide against a pest not listed on the labelings, so long as the animal, plant, or site is listed. So the pest may not be listed, but the area that you're applying it to could be, and that way you can still apply it for hopeful control of that particular pest. Use of equipment or method of application not prohibited by the labeling. If it doesn't say that you can't aerial apply those chemicals, then in essence you could have those aerial applied if that was something you wanted to do.
If that was an option for you. The next one says mixing with fertilizer. Nobody likes to make any more trips than they got to.
Right.
We are all busy. It costs money to go across the field. We want to put as much stuff together as we possibly can, but maybe not necessarily the case. Sometimes we have to take another step or two to get the full utilization of the product.
Correct. And then mixing different pesticides if not prohibited by the dosages or at below the listed rates. So, again, that comes back to that jar test. If it doesn't specify that you can't mix it with other chemicals, you can try the jar test and see if it feels compatible, meeting those conditions and whatnot from that side of things. Now, in saying, talking about these exceptions, I do want to caution, our applicators that even with these exceptions, we run into trouble, situations where they can even following these exceptions are not helpful.
True. Yeah.
Across the board. So there are some exceptions, but if we follow the label as written, because it's the law, we will have much more opportunity for success with those particular products than if we are following some of these exemptions.
True, and also it will help with the longevity. Those rates are on there for a specific reason.
Right, and they've put tons and tons of money and time into coming up with these rates so that they're compatible with their products. So there is a lot of things to think about from that side of things. But just wanted to kind of throw out there are some exceptions, but we feel like the labeled minimum rates are better than trying to go below the rate or off target, things like that, because we are not allowed to do it unless it falls into one of these exceptions. We thank you guys for your time. Hopefully, discussing some of these things has been beneficial. If you have any questions about pesticide labels, feel free to contact your local extension office, and they can help you with more details about the pesticide label itself. Thank you.